On this episode, we have Isilla Simpkins and Erich Colon Morales. This will be a little bit different of an episode today. We've got two brilliant attorneys on the show today. Isilla Simpkins is an estate planning lawyer who has her own practice called IGS Legal, and she's been practicing in wills, trusts, all the estate litigation. Fascinating lady. And then Erich Colon Morales works for Cigar & Associates. She's an associate with a family law practice. And Cigar & Associates, they work with family law, prenups, divorces, all the ugly stuff that happens sometimes. They work closely together. They're friends. And so we thought it would be fun to have them on the podcast together. And man, I'll tell you what, the energy was crazy. I think you're going to like it. Please like and subscribe. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Hole in the Wall Business Podcast with Bill and James. I'm James Groves, and along with my business partner, Bill Dement, we want to share our journey as small business owners with you. As owners of Hole in the Wall Drywall Repair, we will attempt to peel back the curtain of owning a small business in the trade service industry and talk about the many adventures of owning a small business. Hey, Bill.
Hey, James, you know what? Based on that pre-show today, I got to tell you, I don't know what to expect. Other than it's going to be fun and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, we should just record them for no reason.
For no reason.
Just to have,
yes.
Because it's such a fun time. And we're going to get right into it. You all are in for a treat today. We have a pair of dynamic attorneys, and they're a lot of fun. They're good friends of mine, and I cannot wait for you to meet Erich Colon Morales, and we have Isilla Simpkins. So welcome, ladies.
Yep. Welcome to the show, guys.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. And so just we've got two attorneys. Typically just do the one guest, but it was funny when we were talking, you're saying, well, let's just do it together because they're similar in practices, but they're separate. And they're friends and they're Puerto Rican and they're just fun.
And I guess I like her a little bit. I don't know.
She's all right. She's all right. So Erich, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. So my name is Erich Colon Morales. And, I say it very eloquently. So to hear, for everybody in the back, so they hear how to pronounce my name correctly, But yeah, so I do and I dabble in family law, right? But I didn't just, I'm not going to just give you cliff notes. I'm going to give you some background. I am Puerto Rican, as you mentioned, James.
Yeah.
I was born there. I only lived there for a couple of years as a child. And then I actually moved here to Orlando. So I was actually raised in Orlando. I am from Kissimmee, borderline Orlando, Kissimmee. So I've been here all my life until I decided to leave the nest, per se. Mm-hmm. I think maybe the Puerto Rican household was a little too much for me. I needed a break. And by break, I went to Miami, right, for a little bit more party. So I guess I couldn't escape that. But I ended up doing school there, and I ended up staying for law school in Miami. And I loved it so much, I never thought I would leave Miami. And I did. I clerked at different areas of law. I did real estate, foreclosures, evictions, probate, wills and trusts. And after doing all of that, I realized I didn't like any of it. And I was like, it was like my second year of law school going into my third. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I interned at Cigar & Associates, which is a firm that I'm at right now. I clerked there and I fell in love immediately with family law. I love the challenge. I love the people. It's a very sad area of law, I'm not going to lie, but, I think I can liven it up a little bit. So
Yeah. I got to tell you, you don't look old enough to have all of that experience.
Right. I get that a lot. Yeah. I get that a lot. When I first started showing up to court, it was interesting because I started going into the court system very early on because as a clerk, you need to make sure you're present. You follow your attorney around everywhere. And then when I became the actual attorney, right, now the other attorneys, oh, my God, I remember you when you would show up at mediation.
Oh, that's fun.
And the judge would be like, oh, my God, nice to see you. Nice to see you pass the bar. Nice to see that you're here. So they all knew how young I was, and they're so surprised. But at least I had made myself, my presence known. So after a while, I was like, okay. But I still show up in court, and I'm like, I'm just like a little mouse.
Yeah, you could like, remember 21 Jump Street where the adults would pretend to be children?
Yeah.
Because you look like you're still in high school.
Yeah, thank God I don't got braces, huh?
No.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be great.
And so how long have you been with Cigar & Associates?
Oh, my God. It's about to be 5 years now. with
Wow.
Sagat and Associates. So I love it there. I ended up moving. I was in Miami for quite some time. And like I said, I wanted to stay there. But eventually the business model for the firm, he's always wanted to expand the firm to Orlando. So that's when I decided to take the jump. And I was like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll man it. I'll start the firm over here and kind of oversee the process here.
Mhm.
Plus, my family was still here and my fiance. So it was kind of all telling me, leave. So
No,
here I am.
we're glad you made the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the guy said, you should need a passport to go to Miami. It's
Yeah,
such,
I'm
a,
not.
such a different place.
I'm not into Miami.
It's
Unlike you, I avoid it at all costs.
Well, that was E-Rich. So, Isela, tell us about you. What's your story?
My name is Isela Simpkins. My business is IGS Legal. I am an estate planning attorney. I also handle probate and special needs planning. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that means because I feel like when I say that, people are like, what?
Mm.
So it's wills, trusts, powers of attorney, anything regarding end of life planning. So what happens to your stuff and your people after you're not here. And then probate is just the process of administrating that after you've passed away. So we plan for the front end, and then on the back end, we come in and make sure that the plan goes through. If there's no plan, we make it up as we go along. I am
Within the
also-
context of the law, of course.
Within the
Right.
context of the law,
Yes.
we follow the statutes. Yes,
Of course.
yes. Thank you.
So they say.
Yes. So I am also originally from Puerto Rico. I grew up there. I moved to the U.S. when I was 18 to go to college. I have lived in Iowa, where I got my undergrad. I have lived in Colorado, where I got my graduate degree because I thought I was going to be a teacher. But I moved to Florida, to St. Petersburg, where I went to law school. And then once I graduated from law school, I ended up in criminal law, which is awesome. Every new lawyer should do that for a little bit. It's
Really?
fun. And
It's a
it's
treat.
crazy and it's chaotic and just doesn't pay very well.
Right. Outside of being pregnant, you also don't look like you have all that experience.
Oh, no, I was a prosecutor for 7 years.
Wow.
Yes, I loved it before I went private. And then when I started seeing what private was like, I was like, I think I'm just going to go on my own. And then that's when I started IGS Legal, and I focused on estate planning, which is a way more laid back field than criminal law. And I love it.
It's funny because you're different but similar, right? They're all frankly a little depressing.
So I was that whole time she's talking, I'm like, wow. So divorces are sad, but I don't know, death is even sadder.
Death is-
You might
Right.
be. You might
Yeah.
be.
Yes, you're right. But I just always see it like often my consults end in tears. But
Right.
I'm always like, okay, but you're doing this now so that later your family doesn't have to worry about this.
Yeah. So you're really benefiting because if you don't do the hard part ahead of
Yes.
time, you're really struggling afterwards.
Yeah.
be worse.
And then it's going to be your
or you've just
family.
left it for someone else.
Right.
Yes. Your family who's trying to grieve, now they have to figure out what's going on. And Florida statute, if you don't do it, they got everything covered.
Yeah.
So if you don't think you have a plan, you do. It's
Yeah.
just
They
the
do it
one the
for you.
government has for
Right.
you.
Yeah. I'm curious about that. Let's just talk real fast about the importance of having some sort of will or estate ready. Because if not, the whole probate side, I don't know a lot about it because I've always had a will and a trust, but I'm just curious. I mean, if you don't have something in writing, right? If you don't have someone like you helping the family put on pen and paper what you want, what's the process?
So if you don't have a will or a trust when you pass away, they call it an intestate proceeding. So your family would hire an attorney, they would open up a probate, and then essentially the court now has to step in. They have to find what your assets are, who your heirs are, and they decide how it's going to be divided based on a table that the Florida legislature has created. So if you don't decide, they're going to decide based on that table.
Wow.
Now, if you die with a will, it's going to go through court as well. It's just you've already decided. The only way to avoid probate altogether, which is that administrative process, is with a trust. But the will, the probate process, a lot of people want to avoid it because it's expensive. There's also a table for how
Very.
much your attorney can charge.
Very.
And it's a percentage, but after a certain amount of money, it's a percentage of what you have. And it can get really expensive.
Wow.
Right.
And it also can take a long time. And you also open yourself up to because you didn't say what you wanted. So now, if you have 5 kids, if you have 2 kids, they all want different things. You didn't say what you wanted. So now they're like, well, he said that he wanted this. No, he said that he wanted this. So that extends the process, makes it more expensive, and you're just lining the pockets.
And if you're in a divorce
Of people like me.
and you die in the middle of the divorce,
That's
even
also fun.
worse.
Oh my.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, let's say you're in a divorce for 3-4 years, right? You're litigating it, you got a business, you got properties, right? You don't want your spouse any of it. If your estate planning documents are not in effect, right? Are not in effect in a sense that they're not in order, right? There's a will that you signed 20 years ago and your beneficiary in your heirs is going to be your wife, right? In the middle of divorce, it don't matter if you're in a divorce. When you die, all of that's going to go to your wife.
Yep.
All hated and pettiness aside.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Until you sign that final,
Right.
until you get that final paper from the judge.
Right.
I have a question. If there's no divorce involved here, but you pass, would your spouse inherit what you have? A surviving spouse?
So you're gonna hate this answer. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on if you have minor kids, and it depends on if you have kids outside of not outside the marriage. If you're a blended family,
Mhm, right.
I mean,
Right.
if you have kids outside the marriage, that's also going to impact it. But so it's going to depend on what your family looks like. For the most part, yes. Usually, if you pass away and all your kids are grown, it's your wife is going, and they're both of your kids. Your wife is going to get everything. But one of your kids could be like, "Oh, but he didn't leave a will, and he told me that he was going to give me the
Right.
beach condo."
The kids are the scary part.
Mm.
They will really want their cut, especially if they're adults.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Going to be on the lookout.
my
here.
kids are fully my kids are all fully grown. Your kids are all fully grown.
Yeah.
So if something happens to either one of us, the spouse takes over.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
it should all go to your spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's certain things that are protected.
Mm.
Your homestead is protected. So you can't, if you decided that you wanted to leave it to your friend, you can't do that.
Mm.
So.
What about your girlfriend?
Oh God, please don't. I got so many cases where, there's people that they come out as a married, they live like a married couple, right? And that's totally fine. That's a generation now, but they have kids 10, 15 years on the line. They're living all together, singing kumbaya, everything's great until, right? Until they no longer want to be together, right? And then they have property in their name, accounts in their name, and the law doesn't see them as a married couple. Right. So let's say for property, I have tons of cases. I have one right now, actually. And ideally, when you have kids with somebody, let's say you're a stay-at-home mom, right? You're a stay-at-home mom and dad was always the breadwinner, right? And she dedicated her life to this household, the father of her kids and her kids. When they want to separate, right? And there's a huge issue, who's getting the house?
Hmm.
So the law doesn't say that you get it 50-50 if you're not married. Right. The law says, yes, let's start at 50-50, right? You sell it. But then I'm gonna calculate. I'm gonna run my books for every month that I paid everything on my own. Right. And they have the ability to do that. And then she's gonna say, oh, but we lived together and I did this. It doesn't matter. They have to go through the process of who paid the mortgage, who paid the insurance, who paid the property taxes, right? What repairs were needed to maintain the house. And if that's not the case, and she didn't, there's different legalities toward it. You can say that your value as a homemaker has worth, right? There's not a money sign to it, but the court can consider it. But if you leave the house and there's one party that only lives in there with the kids, the person who is making the payments and living there gets to ask for money back in the event of a sale. So you're not going to get a clean 50-50. So,
There's no
Yeah.
common law marriage, no
No
matter
common law
how
marriage.
long you're together.
That was a question because I've always heard
Yeah.
of 7
No.
years, your
Nope.
common law, blah,
Doesn't
blah,
Not
blah.
in
exist in
Florida.
Other
Wow.
states, yes. Florida, not at all. Doesn't exist.
Interesting.
Or legal
There's no
separations.
common
I
law
do get a lot of
marriage.
calls. I want to separate from my spouse. I was like, all right, so separate. Go ahead, separate. They're like, no, I want a specific piece of paper that says we're legally separate. I'm like, no, honey, that
That's
doesn't
called a
exist
divorce,
here.
right?
Yes.
You know what? It's called a divorce, or you can do a postnup. You can do a postnuptial agreement, and not to be super technical, but it's essentially the same thing as a prenup. but you're still married and you decide how your stuff is going to be divided if you do divorce.
And might be harder to work out after the fact, right? When everyone has bad, sore feelings.
Right,
Yes.
right. It's a little uncomfortable. They'd be like, honey, I know we've been married for 10 years, but I would really like you to sign this document that says that we are going to divide everything.
There's
this
nothing
way,
going
right?
on. Everything's on the up and up and stuff like that.
Honey, I love you, but please sign this that I get the house in the event and I get $5,000 every month.
Yeah. Well, listen, Florida's also a weird state because it's a no-fault state, right? So it's
Yes.
No fault state.
and it doesn't matter if the husband or wife is cheating. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
But
unless there are receipts.
Ooh.
Yeah. Don't spend joint money.
I feel
on
like there should
affairs.
be organ music here. Dun, 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 dun.
Don't spend joint money on affairs.
Receipts. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to subpoena and scour years of records looking for specific things on their credit card statements,
Really?
hotels. Right. So to an extent, it is a no-fault state. You don't have to allege that somebody did something more than the other in order to get the divorce. You just have to claim that your marriage is broken, right? It's dead. We don't want to get back together. But that spouse, that was the non-adulterous spouse, can claim an unequal amount of money in the marital estate for every dollar. So if she has proof or he has proof that they incurred $50,000 in another, extramarital affair,
Mhm.
he or she is entitled to at least 25%, 50% of that, so 25,000.
Well,
Interesting.
Well, I have a friend of mine years ago. He used to work with me at Disney actually years ago, and his wife would do music lessons at her home. 4 kids. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was doing music lessons. She was in the Philharmonic here in town years ago. And come to find out, they weren't really music lessons. She was having an affair. And so she's got 4 kids. The kids go to school. She would give music lessons. He found out they get divorced. He's now got to pay child support for 4 children because he was a
Right.
breadwinner of the company, of the family. So he was really almost a sole breadwinner. So he literally, if the house ended up being hers because that's where they all lived, he lived in a single bedroom apartment over someone's garage for 5 years.
It's sad.
Eating ramen noodles.
Oh, God.
And she's the one, he was perfectly happy, perfectly content, but yet she's the one who had the affair. And I've always thought that, doggone it, that's not really fair. He can't even have his 4 kids over to his house to visit because he can't afford.
He can't afford all the
He
space.
can't afford all the space.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get angry about that when they find out. Oh, sorry, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who did what.
Especially with child support.
Mhm.
Child support's one of those things that, a lot of people tell me like, oh, but isn't there a way? No, boo-boo. No, there isn't.
Yeah.
You cannot waive child support because ultimately a lot of people think it's money going to the spouse or the parent. It is not. It is money for the child. That is a right entitled to the child. So there's ways around it, right? Depends on everybody's incomes and everything, but it's not something you can just say, nope. I object. I opt out.
So,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
not.
alimony potentially, right? But
Well, alimony potentially, yes. But ever since last year, I think it's been officially a year now, a little bit more.
Yeah, the
July
laws have
2023,
changed,
the
right?
law has changed. So for the longest time, permanent alimony was, for everybody, amazing in Florida. Everybody wanted permanent alimony. You've been married 10 years, 15 years. I want permanent alimony until I die, right? And within reason and with the right finances, you could ask for it and you could get it.
Hmm.
Last year, Florida law says no more. There's no more permanent alimony. So I've had, it's interesting because I've had active cases, right, while the changes. And unfortunately, unless you already had an order or judgment, everything you asked for, 6 months before this law change, it's out. Like there's no more permanent alimony. So I have a lot of, I think it affects mostly homemakers, right? That's just their lifestyle, right? And they have a spouse who's the breadwinner. And they get stuck because they're like, what do you mean I only get alimony for 5 years? It's like, well, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do.
You got 5 years to find a job.
You got 5 years to find
So
a
it's
job
5
and
years now?
anywhere. No, so it depends. So you essentially now, it's honestly, I low key don't tell anybody, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that there's an actual calculator now, right? So they take 35% of the difference of your net incomes. Right. So if one spouse makes 10,000 net and the other one spouse takes 5,000 net, they deduct that $5,000, they take 35% of that. And that's like your maximum amount that you would need each month. Right. And it's either that or whatever your need is. And need meaning what are your expenses, what is your income, and how much is that leftover amount that doesn't, what's the deficit? That
I'm
would be
with
your
you.
need.
That does seem more even-handed, doesn't it?
It's very
Yeah.
even-handed because then it really does evaluate, like, does this person need this X amount of money, right? Because there's some crazy ass. I want $7,000 a month, and the guy makes like I don't know, $15K a month. That's half of his salary, right? That's just super unreasonable.
Yeah.
And then the length of time is also super specific now. So depending on if you're married like 0 to 10 years, 10 to 20, or more than 20, there's a different percentages for the amount of time that you can have alimony for. So there's a cutoff date.
Well, is there if the husband and wife just decide to separate, split the assets, they're done. No alimony, no child support. Is that easy to do?
They can do it. And I always tell, a lot of my clients will be like, well, how much is this going to cost me and how long is this going to take? Well, it depends on you and your spouse, right? That depends completely on you and your spouse, because if you want to decide to just split everything, or what properties you want to keep, or I'm not going to touch your business, right? Because businesses are the worst part. We'll get there. But, at the end of the day, if you want to agree to it and sign a piece of paper, you can do it and you can say no alimony. And then there's different ways, there's creative ways that you can sign an agreement to technically, kind of get some alimony, but maybe it's a lump sum, right? Like maybe it's not something consistently over the years. And then perhaps that you get 50% of a property and your spouse says, you know what? Because you're entitled to alimony, I'm going to give you the whole house, right? And that should cover you, right? Because it's a paid in full house. And then what do you need alimony for, right? So that's just like an example.
So there are things that we can do on your side, Isela, to help the situation in the case of a divorce, right? So your prenups and stuff, you're doing prenups and stuff too?
Irech does prenups and she does postnups, but
They conflict though with the state stuff. So yeah, you definitely can do a lot.
yes, so you can. There are things you can do planning wise. If you as soon as you file for divorce, you should be changing your
Yeah.
beneficiary designations on everything, which is where I come in. You should be updating trusts if needed, wills if needed, because like Reg said, if you die in the middle of this process, which is unusual but not unheard of, then all these documents that you've drafted.
I mean, it could be life insurance, whole life talent policies, all those
Yes.
things.
Everything. It's not just the
And
stuff.
We went through actually and looked at everything when the change needed. When officially the court's like, no, you had already filed. It's over. The only document that immediately gets revoked is the power of attorney. So everything else is still valid.
Right.
Everything else falls under you already had it done. And if you change everything and you die and you're still married, your spouse might still be entitled to the elective share. That's a way lower percentage because most estate plans say everything to my spouse, everything to my spouse. And if they don't survive me, then to my kids. So if you change it, now they have to go after the 30%, the elective share, and they have to affirmatively go to court and say, I want that.
So is there things that we can do to protect the businesses on your side? Or
Yes, but it's going to involve prenups and postnups.
is it?
Right. Yeah.
So you can set up your own individual trust. Marital assets are interesting because they can start out separate, and then when you start moving money for this or for that, or using joint money to do this and that in the business, then you've opened up your whole business to being examined by the court.
Yep.
So it takes a lot of even if you create this separate trust and we move your LLC into that trust and that's just your trust, if you touch anything outside, if you use your joint bank account to make one insurance payment for your business, now you've opened up your whole business to be
Right.
examined, to see the accounting, to see how that money was used, where it came from, when was it established, what was the agreement. So it can get really messy if you don't
Yeah.
think of it ahead of time.
Especially for business owners.
But what you can't do is for your kids, if you're setting up a trust for your kids, they can be protected. That trust can be protected from divorce because it's your stuff that you're putting in. So it's better
Yeah.
to put it through a trust, especially if you have questions about the relationship. It's better to leave money in the trust because that's going to stay their money. They technically do not have control over it, and they're subject to what the trustee gives them. So if they are going through a divorce, that's separate money that is not going to be counted in the division of assets.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Or don't get divorced.
Or don't get
Right.
divorced.
Maybe just work on the relationship
Yeah.
instead.
Go
Or-
to a little bit of therapy.
Counseling
some
sounds cheap by
counseling.
Divorce is
comparison.
expensive.
Or these
too, yeah.
these men dating these wacko ladies. Just choose wisely. Sorry, I just like why would you get married if I'm going to lose everything? You know, if you don't have morals, I guess
No,
that's the
it's a good
conversation.
point. And when I'm
Yeah.
going through these prenups, right, these intakes with clients, I go through, usually a spouse will get, or soon to be spouse will get a proposed agreement, right? And as I'm going through it with them, right, I'm like, well, this says this. This says that, if you guys get divorced, it's all going to be his or it's all going to be hers, right? And I'm going through it with them. And at the end of the meeting, they're looking at me so distraught. They're like, I don't know if I want to get divorced. I mean, I don't know if I want to get married.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, this is a big decision. I mean, I'm a hopeless romantic. I believe in love, but it's also a contract, right? So you have to be super, super observant of all the language that goes into a prenup. And then for business owners, like you said, I was saying, the minute that you commingle, right, and that's the term that we use, commingle anything, right? So let's say you have a business bank account on your own. You got a business bank account, pays all your business expenses. But then you start, let's say you run your business from your home, right? So now you got, all right, so how does a business pay for the internet in the house? Business uses the electricity of the house. And this is the same house that you live with your kids and your wife, and it's your marital home. So at that point, it almost makes it almost impossible for a court to ever separate the two, ever. Or even the mortgage. Let's say whatever. Oh, well, all my taxes, it doesn't matter what your taxes say, right? It doesn't matter. They're going to look at your bank accounts. They're going to look at who pays what, how does it get paid, and how can you separate it? And if you can't separate it, it's marital.
When I draft estate plans for people that are not married, I strongly suggest that if they're in a serious relationship and they don't need to get married,
Think about it.
think about it, right?
Right,
And
right.
if you are, because there's a difference between meeting your spouse in your 20s when you're both broke, building your business or
Mhm.
doing whatever you're doing, and then growing together, than meeting when you're in your 50s and you're both established. Maybe you have a business, you've worked towards something, you have your own home. As soon as you get married, that person gets all these rights that you might not even have thought about.
Yeah.
And I always say grief changes people. You don't know how that person's going to react after you pass away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and it has to be a very well thought out prenup, because you have to affirmatively waive. So you have to actively say in there that the spouse is waiving the elective share, that they're waiving homestead rights, that you have to say the prenup covers divorce. A lot of people don't know that if you don't specifically put in there that you're also waiving these rights after they die, they still have those rights. So if you get married today and you pass away tomorrow, they're your spouse.
You know, we have. I'm a big believer in contracts. Just having, because we talk about it a lot between Bill and I. It's like it's better to have an understanding now
Yes.
than a misunderstanding later.
Right.
It's like when my grandmother was older, she was in her 80s. She wrote her will out, and she basically gave us all a copy. She says, "Here's what I've got, James. You're going to get this. My mom's going to get this." She would actually have us go and put Post-it notes on items in her house that when she passes away, we've already staked claim to those areas, because she didn't want to have a misunderstanding between the family members. And she wasn't a wealthy lady, so it wasn't a big deal. But she just didn't she prepaid for her funeral. She paid for the cremation.
Wow.
It was all done ahead of time. So she's like, when I die, all I want you to do is just get together and love on me for a minute longer. And then just, it's all separated. But having that understanding early was a very uncomfortable conversation. Sitting down as a family, and she's like, "All right, listen, I'm not going to live forever. Here's how I'm thinking it should go. What do you guys think?" And we sat as a family and we talked about it. And she wrote her will out. And my mom,
She
had
was a
copy.
wise, thoughtful
Yeah,
woman.
she was also worked in the court system for
That's
for
very
decades.
rational.
I feel like when you see stuff, you want to do something about it.
Mhm.
But no, people don't want to have the conversation, and you're not going to last forever. And when I sit down with people to plan, because I meet them at different stages of life, some have just gotten married, some have just had kids, some are planning because they know I drafted some documents for a client that was in hospice. So they're all at different stages. And I always tell them, we need to plan if something is going to happen to you tomorrow. Because the reality is that you may live a full life, but you might get in your car tomorrow and get in a car accident, and that's it. So we need to, what is your stage of life right now? If something happened to you tomorrow, what do you want your stuff to do? Where do you want it to go? Who do you want to take care of your kids? Who do you want to be in charge of your finances, your medical decisions tomorrow? And if that changes down the road, then we'll deal with that. But we need to plan as if this is happening tomorrow.
Yeah, in business, because Bill and I, we've had this discussion a lot because we had a third partner and we had Gerard Grant set up a partnership agreement between the three of us.
Right.
Really great document. And then our third partner got sick and passed away. And so if we hadn't had that document already in place, those conversations are way more awkward. So we're
Yes.
obviously we buying a spouse out and that whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
But it would really hit home for us because there was a time when Bill got sick and like, what happens if? And so so our first contract was literally on a piece of paper. Here's what's going to happen. Just to have something in writing.
Give me another napkin, quick.
Yeah. And then of course we met Gerard, and Gerard he took us home. And then Gerard was there for us as our business attorney after the passing. That he helped us walk through navigate the whole process. So I wasn't trying to negotiate with
Yes.
the widow.
Yes.
It's like, no, she's my friend. I don't want to worry about this. So the
Yeah.
attorney was able to come in and it was all dialed in because the agreement was set in place.
Everyone's on the same page,
Yeah.
transparency.
Yeah.
And
Paperwork is fun.
And a designed set of steps going forward.
Yes. So because I do work with businesses, if you have a complex business partnership like that, I usually recommend that you go to a specific business attorney.
Right.
But if it's something simpler where it's just you and you're just worried about what's going to happen to the business after, then I can work with you and we can work together to decide if we wanted to do a trust, just a simple assignment post-death. You just want to dissolve the business. So I can handle the simpler business law cases.
Yeah.
But when there's something more complex like that, when there's multiple partners, there's spouses, then that's definitely something that I would recommend you sit with a business attorney.
I think that's wise. And having the knowledge, there's so much data now available online, right? I mean, ChatGPT can write you a contract, right? Whether it's right or not, who knows? I mean, you have LegalZoom and all these other platforms. And what I've found is that there's too many nuances in your life and your business that AI or that LegalZoom.
Yeah, one size isn't going to fit all.
They're
Yeah.
not going
No.
to catch it. They're not going to catch everything.
So if anything, what advice would you give? If you're trying to save a little bit of money and you found a great contract, was it better to do that and then at least have someone like you look at it?
I won't look at contracts drafted
Good for
by software or artificial intelligence. As soon as I look at it, it's under my license.
Wow.
Right.
So I didn't draft it and I'm looking at it. There's a difference between when you're reading something and when you're writing something. You're looking at it with different sets of eyes. So if I miss something, I looked at it. So it's
Yeah.
on me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's an ethical dilemma to the sense, or even in family law, there's a lot of smart forms, right? Even the actual courthouse will provide with pro se litigants, pro se is just people that don't have an attorney, with forms that they can fill out themselves, and then the courthouse gives it to them, their packets. And I have had, some clients reach out to me, well, I just have this packet and I just need help filling it out. I'm like, sorry, like if you're going to retain me as your attorney, I'm going to do it the right way, the proper way, and the way that I want my name and obviously how we want to appear and what we want to represent. Right. And it becomes an issue because let's say there's something in there that we didn't approve or it's incorrect. Right. And not even just like smart forms through the court, but something you download online. At that point, like I've had some cookie cutter, a contract is valid at any point. Right. You can legitimately do it on a napkin, as you mentioned, Bill, or I've had, divorces where they do one pager, couple paragraphs, they write it themselves and it was introduced into court. Right. But the minute those are the number one contracts that have the most issues in the middle of the divorce because it's ambiguous, it's not clear, you don't understand, and then you're stuck in the intricacies of what are the intent of the parties. And that's what I would recommend to anybody. So anybody that is really trying to, not have to go through an attorney, at the end of the day, whatever document you draft that you sign should be super clear what the intent of the parties are. Because when you take that document into court, because there's a lot of people, even with prenups, they try to do it on themselves, which, they're happy to do it. But if it's not clear and it's like, oh, what did you mean by this? Or what did you mean by that? Then it opens up a can of worms, and then you're just subject to getting it dismissed and closed in court.
And it's like you said, you don't know what you need. And that,
Right, that too.
So like when you're thinking about, okay, I got this online, what you're paying your attorney to do is to go through with their training, go through, okay, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if, and address that in the document. So I do that with my clients. Well, what do you want to happen what do you want your retirement
That
account
process
to
is
do
very
this?
annoying, by the way.
What?
It's like, you're asking me a million questions.
Yeah.
But
Because
it's
if
for our own
if
good.
we don't answer it
Very
and we don't
tedious.
put it on there, you're spending the money to draft a trust, right? And if you don't answer that question, now the court's involved. Well, the whole point of this whole thing
It's to avoid court.
was to avoid going to court. So now you're in court. So you wasted your money. So if you do these DIY forms, that's what you're not getting. Can you do it? Sure, do it.
Right.
I would be surprised to find an attorney that would say, yeah, I'll take a look at it and amend it as needed.
Yeah.
Because now you gave me, well, first you're probably expecting to pay way less because you have the bare bones, but it's probably going to take me longer to go through it and see what is wrong with it and
That's
then
an interesting
fix
point.
it.
It's kind of like when someone does drywall themselves and they just want us to come texture.
Yeah.
It's all installed. Just come texture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but look, it's like protruding off the wall.
Years ago, I went to do an estimate for a lady, and she says, "I've always wanted to know how to do it." She says, "I'll help you. I'll be your assistant." And I'm just making notes as I'm taking the estimate. I says, "Customer wants to help. Add 10%."
Yes, right? Yes.
You're
So-
gonna have to fix everything.
She's like, "Oh, that's not good for you." No, it'll be fine.
No, I don't want you to help me with this.
But would you help us, like, say, like my trust is 7 years old, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, when we started traveling a lot, doing some cruises and stuff, and like we looked at our existing estate, we're like going, wait a second, that talks about who's going to take care of our kids when we die. They're
Yeah.
all grown up. It's like, all right,
Right.
let's change this. And so we had someone amend our existing trust
Yeah.
to make it more realistic.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
brings a good point. Is
That I
there
will.
a regular time frame that you should look at, sort of refreshing those?
So, two-part question. So, yes, I will look. I'm very cautious of whose trusts. Like, I have to be familiar with the attorney's reputation because some attorneys are just cranking out the same trust over and over. So, and I do charge hourly for that because I don't know how well that trust is written. So, if I'm drafting and I tell my clients the amount of changes that you want, it's going to be cheaper
Just do a new one.
to just do a new one. This is how much my new one costs. We can meet as many times as you want. You can do everything the same or everything brand new. And that's what I can offer you. This is my hourly. This is how much. Is there an interval? I recommend every year. That's what my newsletter is about that I am sending out on Monday. I was writing it this morning. Every year, you should be looking at your documents yourself to see if all your beneficiary designations, if your agents that you name, that would be like who makes decisions for you financially, healthcare wise, who you appointed as your executor or your trustee, if those are still people that you want. If you have kids and you appointed a guardian, are those still the guardians that you want? Are they still willing and able to do it? So you should be doing that yourself. If there's anything on there that is different than what you want, you should be reaching out to your attorney to fix that.
So essentially, anytime there's a
But
change
also,
in life
anytime there's
circumstances,
right?
yes. So if you acquire property, if you're thinking about acquiring property, if you're going to create a business, if you're dissolving your business, if you're going through a divorce, if there's a death, if there's a birth, any major life change so I would say probably it should be about 3 years where you're sitting down with an attorney and being like, okay, let's look at what changed.
So, like, even like a child getting married or having a baby, are those things? that
Yeah, if you want to include that
As well.
baby.
Mhm.
If you want to provide for that baby, yes. And if you want the attorney to sit down with you and say, okay, well, the way we structure your trust, you're fine. If they get a divorce, the portion that you left your child is covered. But anytime you think there's a change or a major change, then yes. And I don't do this. Some attorneys offer like maintenance programs. where they sit down, they charge you a fee every year, and every year they sit down with you and they tell you whether or not there needs to be a change. I include one consult within the first 3 years after we draft your documents, where I sit down with you at no additional cost, and I tell you whether or not there need to be changes made. And then from there, we'll take it from there.
Did you know that there are over 140 million homes in the U.S.? 97% of them have walls and ceilings that are built using drywall. The drywall repair industry is simply enormous, valued at over $13 billion a year. We're hole-in-the-wall drywall repair, and for years we have been perfecting the art of repairing drywall, developing and refining our systems, and strengthening our brand. Our business model is simple, scalable, and easy to learn. We believe it's a real game changer. We are successful drywall repair pros who decided to take our repair business to a higher level, growing both our franchise training and support to industry-leading standards. You'll benefit from our vast experience helping your franchise hit the ground running and achieve success quickly. We'll give you access to our marketing team that has created strategic programs designed to get your phone ringing and booking new business fast. Join a fast-growing leader in an exciting dynamic segment of the home service industry by franchising with Hole-in-the-Wall Drywall Repair. Start building your own business and securing your own financial future today. A lot to consider. So even a young married couple should sit down with you.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Especially
Yeah.
a young married couple should sit down with me. If you have a kid under 18, you need to have something.
Yeah.
You need to have something. This is my personal, my mom lives in Puerto Rico, and when we drafted our estate planning documents, she just wasn't able to take care of my kid because she was taking care of my dad, who has very severe dementia. And so for us, it was like, well, if something happens to us, it's going to be either your parents or my parents. And that's not the person that we wanted. So for us, it was very important. If we don't have that, we picked our very close friends to be our son's guardians. If we don't have that, that's not who the court is going to pick.
Right.
Yeah.
So from that, if you take it from that perspective, and then you also add the fact that minors can't inherit. So what you're building this legacy, maybe you have a business and it's doing well and you know your kids are going to be set, but then the court gets involved, takes that money and holds it until they turn 18. If they need that money, they need to ask the court for it. The court's going to appoint somebody to manage that money. That might not be who you wanted either. So setting your kids up, that is what I try to convey to parents and new couples. You need to set up a plan now, and then we just work on how it moves through the years.
Well, and there's consideration also for kids that are over 18, right? Someone put us onto this a few years ago. I have 4 adult kids. They're all, the youngest one's 19, the oldest one's 26, but they're unmarried. So if something were to happen to them, if you don't have some kind of legal document in place, then the state would decide what happens. And my kids have done well. Listen, I taught them to work. I taught them to save. And they don't come asking me for money. I'm like, dang, give me a
That's
loan.
the best scenario.
Right.
And
But they still need some protection, right?
You're right. And you should. And
Their assets anyway.
I always tell people, I offer a free consult. So sometimes you sit down with me and I'm like, well, if this is what you have, this is what you can do. It costs you nothing. Like, I don't have to get involved in this. Just do this, 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 and this, and you're done.
Yep.
Or it might be like, you need a will, or you need a deed, or you need a trust. But if you don't talk to the attorney, you don't know.
When we took my son to FSU in Tallahassee, he's now 4 hours away from Orlando, and he's 18 years old. He's in college now, and the dean of students got the parent day, and he's like, "All right, folks, your little boy, your little girl are here, and I know you want to call and make sure they're doing fine.
I know you're going.
And if you call me, I'm not going to answer."
Yep.
And why? Because your child's an adult now, and you are not in charge of them anymore. They're in
Yep.
charge of themselves.
Yep.
And it was really funny because then I had another friend of mine who used to do similar, and she's like, "You need a power of attorney. So if something happens to them, you need a medical, whatever, power of attorney." So there's like 4 documents that you need to look at these 4 things just in case something happens. So he gets in a bike accident, he's in a coma, things are going to happen. Now, obviously, the medical is going to tee up to the parents anyways, but to have it in writing, to be able to get into his bank accounts, be able to get into his investment accounts, that power of attorney will help. If his medical bills skyrocket, we don't have the cash for it, but he's got the cash for it. If I can't get into that account, then we don't have access to it, right? But there were some certain documents that were there in place, and this is what Bill was talking about, because we now have adult children, and until they're married, even after they're married, technically, I mean, there needs to be some sort of for their protection.
There has to be a procedure.
That is something that surprises a lot of people. After they're 18, they are adults.
Yes, they are.
Adults in every intent of the law. Just like if they get pulled over and they're drunk, they're going to jail. They're going to adult jail. But also, you're not
Adult
going.
jail.
Yeah, adult jail. No more juvie. But they're going to that. The doctors can refuse to speak to you. The banks can refuse to let you access bank accounts. And this is another part that surprises people because parents will call me and they'll be like, "Oh, well, I need this, this, and this. I need to talk to your son." They are the client. Oh, I'm paying for it. Yes. But they are 18.
Yes.
They are the clients. They need to say, yes, I need to sit down with them, explain what each of these documents does. And then they need to say, yes, I agree to have mom or dad or whoever, which it's up to you how you want to handle that on your end. But I'm just telling you what
It does happen a lot though. Like I will get like younger, parents, usually like paternity cases where they're not married and they're having, baby mama and baby daddy drama. And the parents will be reaching out, trying to do the consultation. And I'm like, they're explaining the issue. And I'm like, oh, are you not the person? No, it's just for my son. I'm like, well, ma'am, I need to speak to your son. It's his issue. He's over 18. And then there are also some people that ask me, obviously in the Hispanic cultures, just because you're 18 doesn't mean nothing. A lot of times, like my mom expected me to be staying in the house until, I am married or have a
curfew.
Yes, curfews. Curfews at 24. I love it. So it's very prominent in the Hispanic cultures. And then I will have clients who will be like, well, I want to have child support past my child being 18. And I'm like, well, you can't do that. She's like, well, how are they? Well, they got to go to college. Who's going to pay for college? And how are their needs going to be sustained? And I'm like, well, they're adults.
They're going to work.
They need to work. Unless you had a Florida prepaid plan, some type of college savings plan for your kid. I'm sorry, but mom or dad is not entitled to pay any kind of child support past the year 18. So
wow. So I'm curious, when attorneys get together, I noticed this with my wife. She's a school teacher. And when the teachers get together, they always talk school, kids, administration, state and federal government. Is this what attorneys do when you guys get together?
Yeah, you know what? It is.
Do you find each other in a crowd?
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's really hard not to talk about certain things, right? It just happens. It just
especially
happens.
when you're in the same field. When I used to be a prosecutor, especially, and we'd go out, that's all we would talk about. We would just complain about judges. We'd complain about clerks. Sorry, Reg. We'd complain about opposing counsel.
Yeah.
So you like to get together and talk shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's usually how it is.
So my next question is, can either one of you, because despite your youthful appearances, both of you have a lot of experience, obviously. And I'm wondering if you have a horror story or an interesting story that's happened to you along the way. Please don't share any names.
No, yeah, obviously it's confidential. It's so hard. I do get asked that a lot, and genuinely.
In any field or like the estate
I
planning
think, yeah,
field?
criminal will have a...
any law affiliated
Okay.
field.
Oh, we want the tea. That's all. We just want some.
Come on, bring the dirt.
Oh, yeah, turn the
My
cameras
favorite-
on.
You want to borrow
one.
a shovel?
My favorite one was when I was a public defender. And I had a client who had several domestic violence cases, and I was representing him for a violation of domestic injunction. And he went to jail for 9 months, despite my best efforts. So he sent me a love letter
Oh my.
from jail telling me what a great job I had done and singing me all these accolades, how beautiful I was, how he hoped that I would wait for him to get out so that we could reconnect and explore our relationship further. I'm like, oh man, I did not mean to give you that impression, sir.
Oh my goodness.
I don't remember the first date.
Do you realize why you're in jail? I don't want to be beat. Sorry, no.
Especially, and I was like, man, the audacity. You know I'm representing you for all these domestic violence related cases.
Oh, that's awful.
I also had an
Ooh,
attorney.
that's creepy.
It was creepy. I also had a client chase me in the courtroom. He was a sovereign citizen. That's a lot of fun. And he yelled at, I don't remember what we were discussing, but he's like, you're a public pretender, which is their favorite insult to public defenders. And then he starts chasing me in the courtroom. I'm like, bailiff. So those were fun.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Sovereign citizen.
Yes. Sovereign citizen. Explain what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know.
Sovereign citizens
That's a hard
are people
one.
who believe that they cannot be arrested while they are committing offenses because they use this obscure part of a code that lawyers use called the UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code that applies when you are doing commerce. So they say that if you're traveling in the road of a state and you get pulled over because you are traveling, you are not subject to the laws of the state.
Right. Any governmental control.
So any governmental control. And they will refuse attorneys. They will talk like the way they behave in court is very interesting. But they don't want the attorney. And in this case, the judge was like, we really need to appoint someone. So she said, I'm appointing you as second chair. So I was second chair to this gentleman. And he was a pleasure to work with, as you can tell. But
Right up till he chased you.
Yeah.
right up until he chased me.
I don't know. I don't get that many love letters. I get a lot of threats.
Oh,
You know, so
my.
a lot of,
Yeah.
well, you know, it usually comes from, I think my favorite cases, absolute favorite, is dealing with other sides that don't have attorneys, right? So they are individuals that are proceeding in the case without counsel. And I have to treat them as an attorney. So anytime, it doesn't matter if they don't know the law, I have to speak to them and handle the case as if they are attorney themselves in the case, right? And a lot of times, you know, they don't like how it goes. So I've had so many different type of cases where, you know, we've gotten a lot of threats or emails and letters. We've had to post images of people in our office, like, beware if you see this person, right? And don't let them in the building. Like we actually have to have, like, our office is locked. To even enter the front door, we lock it, and we have a little camera. What are they called? In order to make sure. And my assistant's so good about it.
Closed circuit.
Yeah, and it's so great because whenever somebody rings a doorbell, it's like our office will be like, oh, who's there? Because it's very rare for people to come into our office. People don't just come into a family law attorney's office like for no reason or without an appointment. So if you do and you hear a doorbell, you're like, who is here? This is strange, unless they already said they were coming by. So.
Right.
And it could be something silly, like upset, and they've even tried to track down our addresses, right? Upset because we are not letting them, we allegedly, right? But it's really the court system is not letting have time with their kid, for example. But it's really because they're just a nut job or drug trafficking or doing some crazy nonsense of a thing.
So how many active cases do you have going on at one time typically?
Oh, that's a lot right now.
And then
I
what's the
think.
average time frame?
Oh, so it depends on the time frame.
I noticed there's a lot of it depends in law, right?
Right,
Yes.
right. Yes, it depends because, you know, I don't want to say there's loopholes to everything because, you know, the law is the law, but time frame.
With loopholes.
Right. I don't even know what that means. Let me know when you look it up. But yeah, for divorces, honestly, I've had divorces that could take as quickly as 4 months and as long as 5 years.
I like how you say quickly and then you say 4 months. And I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's another thing, too. We have to understand that, like, everybody, the public needs to understand the court system is tremendously loaded with cases. All right. Like, this is a nonstop influx. Like, we all have a right to parenting, to get divorced. So with that right is like this incessant need to file anything and everything, right? So not only are there open cases that are being opened in front of the court system, but in those actual court cases, there's continuous issues, and they file and they file and they file. So the more stuff that you file and the more issues there are between the parties, the longer it takes, right? And usually, like with a divorce, if it is taking 4 to 5, 6 years, it's usually because there's multiple properties, businesses, or there's some kind of fraud. There's one party that is really trying to find the money, and there's another one who's really trying to hide the money, right? And in that sense, it's this back and forth. So it depends. And then for paternity cases where they're unmarried and they're just dealing with children's issues, I mean, that can take as little as a year usually, and it's not too bad. And then I will usually have like a caseload of like 40 or 50 clients at a time. So not all of them run hot all the time though, you know? So like there's a long period of time where it'll be a little cold and then we have to prepare for trial. So it's not too awful, but.
So if someone's in a bad relationship, they're not divorced yet, they win the lottery, and they don't cash the ticket until after the divorce. Is that legal?
Oh, that's such a good question. Irech, what's the answer to that?
It's still marital.
Oh,
Because you received that asset, it's like a property, right? It's a title to something, right? So if it's a lottery ticket that you got during the marriage, unfortunately, you're going to have to share it. I mean, they can hide it. They can say they lost a ticket. But let's say they lost a ticket. I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. They get divorced. Great. And then at some point, 2 years later down the route, they found a ticket. You know, they found it and it's cashed. If the hubby or wifey find out, ex-hubby or wifey find out, they can go back into court and say he committed fraud. He, deceived the court. He didn't exchange and disclose all the finances, and I want a piece of my pie. Which
I
has
just
happened
saved
consistently.
somebody a lot of headache with that question right there.
Yes, you did. That was a
Yeah,
really
I was just thinking about that last
interesting
night
question.
myself.
Oh, yeah? I'm going to tell your wife. What's her number?
I don't
I'm going
even-
to start telling, check the pockets, check the drawers.
I don't even play the lottery.
Wow, James, you weren't kidding. You promised me a lively
told you.
podcast with these two,
I told you.
and they delivered. Wow,
Yeah.
you guys have been terrific.
We'll have to get them back in and have some more
Absolutely.
fun. We'll do an
Yes.
off the wall podcast just with these two.
Yeah.
After the baby and
Yeah.
After the baby.
After the baby.
I'm
so.
kid free. I'm ready.
Yeah.
January 1st.
She doesn't want to have to share the microphone.
Well, that will be when I'm
You're
done
due.
with. I'm due December 30th.
Okay.
So I'm calculating 2 days to,
exciting.
Just make sure it's before for New Year for tax deductions, right?
Oh,
So-
yes,
yeah.
definitely. I'm already scheduled. and the insurance deductible.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been so much fun. Remind everybody, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Estella Simpkins?
The best way to get a hold of me is my email, info@igslegal.com. You can also schedule the complimentary virtual consult I was talking about at my website, which is igslegal.com.
And you got to sign up for the newsletter because it's fabulous. Like,
Yes.
Yes. And
Yes, it is. It is. And for me, same way. Email is always the best way, which is IRECH at Segarra.
Spell.
SegarraLawFirm.com, which is spelled SEGARRA.
excellent. Very good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for
guys.
having us, guys.
No, thank
This
you
was
all
so
for
much
taking
fun.
the time to come down. It's been a blast.
It's Cigar, not Cigar and Associates. Whenever she says it, I was
I
like,
don't know. I'm
Cigar
good with
Associates.
cigar session too. Oh, yeah.
That's fun. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in, ladies. This is absolutely fabulous. Bill, another great show. Thanks
Yeah,
everybody for
another
listening.
good show.
Bye, everybody.
We'd like to thank you for listening to the Hole in the Wall Business Podcast with Bill and James. We'd love for you to join our Facebook group and keep the conversation going. If you'd like to learn more about us and our business, check us out at holeinthewall.com. If you'd like to learn more about how to start a Hole in the Wall franchise, go to holeinthewallfranchising.com.